Hi, this is Kathy Weymouth from Tune the Temple, and I'm in a series that is becoming longer than I expected because I keep brainstorming more ideas. But the question I'm asking this series is, do you have too high expectations of yourself? I think this is pretty common with people who struggle with boundary setting. So I'm making this little mini series. This is part 3. In this part 3, I'm going to look at the topic of what emotions rise up when you do not meet your own high expectations, and what can we do with those? Okay, so let me just do a quick review. In part 1, if you haven't watched it, go ahead and go back and watch that. I'm asking some self-reflective questions to help you understand why you might have too high expectations of yourself and to give you more insight. So those were reflective questions. The first question was, do you struggle with knowing that you are human and that you actually have limitations and that you can't be perfect at every single thing in this life? A lot of us struggle with that. So I talked about that in depth in part 2. Do you struggle with knowing you're human, knowing that you have limits and being okay with that? So that was what I discussed in part 2. Go ahead and watch that if you haven't. So another question I asked was, what emotions come up when you fail to meet your high expectations? And we're going to talk about that today in this part of the series. Another question I asked is, what would it be like if you didn't have such high expectations and you didn't experience these negative emotions? Like daydream, how would your life be different if you were a little more relaxed about your standards of yourself? And then question 4 is, do you want to change? Would you like to work on this topic to gain a little more peace within your soul, more peace around who you are and what you're able to do? And then number 5 was, how does this all relate to boundary setting? So we're going to look at those 3, 4, and 5 in future weeks. But today, let's go ahead and dive into what emotions rise up when you don't meet your expectations. So here's one, and I experienced this week with another person I was talking with who was totally overwhelmed. She was overwhelmed because she had such high expectations of herself in sports and in music, and I could just sense the overwhelmness of it. And I reminded her that what I talked about, these professional Major League Baseball players are paid millions of dollars. So my father has corrected me. It's not 30 million. Some of them are getting over $100 million a season, and they don't pitch perfect games. They don't hit a home run every time they come up to bat. So how could we expect so much of ourselves? We're not even paid a penny to meet our expectations. Okay, so the feeling of being overwhelmed might be something that you came up with. Here's another one. What about shame? When you don't meet your expectations, do you feel this like blanket of shame that comes over you and you are embarrassed and you wish that you could go like crawl under a log or something or just get away? That's a common one. It's basically because you are putting your identity related to your performance. So remember, your identity doesn't come from your performance. Your identity is who you are. And I just spent a lot of time getting my identity from my performance. And it's a terrible thing because you can never perform exactly 100% on every single thing in life. What about guilt? Does guilt rise up? Do you feel like you have done something wrong? Because I just looked up the definition of guilt. It's basically when you feel that you've done something wrong or you haven't met your standards. Then you have this guilty feeling that you walk around with. And I know what that's like. I walked around with guilt for so long. And I just really have had a breakthrough. And it's such a relief to not be walking under the shroud of guilt all the time. And embarrassment. Embarrassment is really sort of linked to shame. So maybe you have some other emotions that I didn't think of. And it's important that you recognize them. And when they rise up, what are you going to do with these? Okay, I just want to remind you, this is so important. Emotions are just like the warning lights on your dashboard of your car. They mean something. And what do they mean? They mean something needs to be attended to. Okay, so if the oil light comes on, you need to turn your engine off immediately and put some oil in the car before you turn it on again. There's a shortage of oil in the whole engine. So what does it mean when you feel this guilt or this shame or embarrassment or overwhelming feeling when it comes to expectations of yourself? It means something's off. So I want to ask you, how do you correct that? Do you try harder? Well, if your expectations are already too high, I wouldn't suggest that. How about this? How about just lightening up? How about letting go of expecting yourself to do things so well all the time? You know what? We get one life. And in that one life, I want to help you enjoy your life and have more peace and be more at rest in your soul. So how about saying, oh, yes, I see the shame associated because I didn't do this quite as well as I'd hoped to. Oh, well, I'm a human. I can't do everything perfectly. As long as I'm doing my best and as long as I'm not hurting someone to a great deal, I mean, there's balance in everything I talk about. But how about lightening up? Use those emotions as a barometer that you are being too hard, and have a little conversation with yourself and suggest to yourself that your identity is not dependent on your performance. Remind yourself that you are a human being, that you have limits, that you have weaknesses, and give yourself some grace. Okay, that's my tip for today. Extend grace to yourself when you feel these negative emotions rising up. Keep practicing that, and hopefully you'll get better at accepting yourself for who you are. Okay, Kathy Weymouth at Tune the Temple.